Welcome back to the channel, everyone. And if you love discovering the hidden stories behind everyday coins that most people overlook, coins that look ordinary but secretly carry jaw-dropping value, you are in exactly the right place, because today we are diving into one of the most mysterious, controversial, and mind-blowing stories in American coin history, a coin that millions of people have held, spent, and ignored without ever realizing what it could be worth. A small silver coin that quietly slipped through the U.S. Mint during a chaotic era, a coin that experts still argue about, collectors whisper about, and treasure hunters dream of finding. Because this is the unbelievable story of the 1970 D1 dime, a coin that in the right form, under the right circumstances, with the right combination of errors and minting mistakes, is rumored, theorized, and privately valued at an astonishing $45 million. And before you think that sounds impossible, before you assume this is just another exaggerated coin myth, stay with me to the very end, because the reasons behind this valuation are more complex, more fascinating, and more realistic than most people ever imagine. And by the time this story is over, you may never look at your loose change the same way again, because the 1970 D dime was born at a time when the U.S. Mint was under intense pressure. Production numbers were high, quality control was stretched thin, and experimental processes, worn equipment, and human error collided in ways that created some of the most dramatic mint errors ever known. And it all starts with the Denver Mint itself, a facility pushing out millions of Roosevelt dimes as fast as possible to meet national demand, using dies that were often overused, improperly aligned, or inadequately inspected. And when you combine that with planchet shortages, metal composition transitions, and rushed die preparation, you get the perfect storm for rare mistakes. And one of the most valuable possibilities tied to the 1970 D dime is the existence of off-metal strikes, a scenario where a dime is accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or even a different metal entirely, such as a silver planchet left over from earlier production runs, or a foreign coin blank mixed into the supply. And if a 1970 D dime were proven to be struck on an unauthorized silver planchet or an experimental alloy, authenticated by top grading services and verified through metallurgical analysis, its value would immediately skyrocket into territory where elite collectors and private museums compete, because rarity at that level is not measured in thousands or hundreds, but in single digits or potentially a unique one-of-one survivor. And uniqueness is the fuel that drives eight-figure valuations. But that is only the beginning of what makes this coin so extraordinary. Because another major factor is the possibility of a double die-obverse or reverse so extreme that it escaped detection for decades, a doubling not visible at a glance but dramatic under magnification, affecting the date, mint mark, lettering, or even Roosevelt's profile itself. And when doubling occurs at the hubbing stage rather than during striking, it creates a permanent design distortion that cannot be replicated, meaning every genuine example becomes a fingerprint of mint history frozen in metal. And if a 1970 D dime were discovered with a dramatic, undocumented doubled die combined with additional anomalies such as die cracks, cuds, or rotated dies, the numismatic world would erupt, because layered errors compound value exponentially rather than additively. And this is where the $45 million figure starts to make sense to high-end insiders, not because one small mistake is valuable, but because multiple rare errors converging in a single coin create a once-in-a-generation artifact. And then there is the whisper that refuses to die among advanced collectors, the idea that a small number of 1970 D dimes may have been struck using transitional dies or experimental setups never intended for public release, similar to how other legendary coins were born by accident rather than design. And if documentation or mint correspondence ever surfaced linking the Denver Mint to test strikes or emergency die reused during the year, any surviving example tied to that history would instantly move from collectible to historical treasure. And condition plays a brutal but necessary role in this story as well, because errors alone are not enough. the coin must also survive an exceptional state, ideally mint state with original luster intact, minimal contact marks, and sharp details, because the highest prices are reserved for coins that look as shocking visually as they are fascinating technically. And a pristine error dime with blazing surfaces becomes not just a rarity, but a showpiece, something that auction houses build entire events around. Something that attracts bidders who are not even traditional coin collectors, but investors, institutions, and legacy buyers looking for tangible history. And the Denver Mint mark itself adds another layer of intrigue, because mint marks are more than letters, they are evidence of origin, and certain mints at certain times are known for specific error patterns, and the D Mint in 1970 was no exception. With documented cases of weak strikes, misaligned dies, and irregular mint marks that sometimes appear repunched, tilted, or partially missing, and a repunched or misplaced D Mint mark combined with other errors creates a diagnostic puzzle that experts love and the market rewards. And then there is the possibility of wrong year die usage, a phenomenon where dies intended for a different year are accidentally used, resulting in subtle design mismatches that only seasoned specialists can identify. And if a 1970 D dime were proven to show traits of a die style not officially recorded for that year, it would challenge established references and rewrite a small piece of mint history, and rewriting history is where values explode, because collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying the story, the mystery, and the authority to say they own something no one else can fully explain. And this is why stories like this persist for decades, why people keep checking rolls, jars, and inherited collections. Because the odds are slim, but not zero. And as long as the odds exist, hope survives. And hope is powerful in numismatics, and even skeptics admit that the U.S. Mint's own archives are incomplete, meaning there are gaps where undocumented errors could exist, and those gaps are where legends are born. And the idea that a single 1970 D dime could emerge, authenticated, graded, and presented to the world as the ultimate convergence of rarity, error, condition, and historical mystery is what fuels the $45 million valuation discussed in private circles, not because the coin has already sold for that amount, but because in a market driven by uniqueness, competition, and prestige, the right coin at the right moment can shatter expectations, just as it has before with other legendary pieces. And as you sit there watching this, it's worth remembering that every major discovery started with someone curious enough to look closely at something everyone else ignored. And that is why this channel exists, to make you curious, to make you look twice, and to remind you that sometimes the smallest coins carry the biggest secrets. So if you've ever dismissed dimes as pocket change, maybe tonight is the night you rethink that. Maybe tonight you take a closer look. And if this story has sparked even a little excitement, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us, because the next coin we uncover might already be sitting in your hand. And when you're ready, tell me to continue, and I'll take this story even deeper into the errors, the authentication battles, and the mind-blowing scenarios that push this dime toward legendary status. Next, 1996 P1 dime USA coin. Today's story is going to blow your mind because this is the astonishing, controversial, and deeply fascinating tale of the 1996 P1 dime, a small copper-nickel coin struck at the Philadelphia Mint that looks completely ordinary at first glance, yet, under the right circumstances, with the right combination of minting errors, anomalies, and historical coincidences, has been privately valued by elite collectors and whispered about in high-end numismatic circles as a $31 million coin. And before you dismiss that number as fantasy, stay with me, because the reasons behind this valuation are layered, technical, and rooted in how the U.S. Mint actually operates when things quietly go wrong, especially during high-pressure production years like 1996 when demand was massive, quality control was strained, and experimental processes overlapped with routine strikes, creating opportunities for mistakes that were never meant to leave the mint. And the Philadelphia Mint, unlike Denver or San Francisco, often flies under the radar because its coins carry no mint mark, meaning errors from this facility can circulate for decades unnoticed, blending seamlessly into everyday change. And that anonymity is exactly what makes certain Philadelphia errors so dangerous, so elusive, and so valuable, because when an error is hard to spot, it survives longer. And when it survives longer, the chance of a pristine example emerging decades later increases. And condition plus rarity is where true value is born, and the 1996 P dime sits right at the intersection of both, beginning with the possibility of transitional composition errors, because while the public knows modern dimes as copper-nickel-clad coins, the Mint's internal handling of planchets, scrap, and experimental metal batches is far more complex than most people realize. And there are documented cases across U.S. coinage where leftover planchets from canceled projects, test alloys, or foreign contracts were accidentally fed into presses. And if even a single 1996 P dime were proven to be struck on an unauthorized planchet, whether silver, a foreign alloy, or a wrong-weight experimental blank, the discovery would instantly become numismatic news worldwide, because off-metal errors from the Philadelphia Mint are already rare. And a previously unknown example tied to a year with massive production numbers would represent a catastrophic yet fascinating breakdown in mint controls. And catastrophic errors are exactly what high-end collectors chase, not because they reflect perfection, but because they reveal the human side of minting, the moments when machines, systems, and people failed in just the right way to create something irreplaceable. And then there is the issue of doubled dies, one of the most misunderstood yet powerful drivers of value in modern coins, because not all doubling is equal. Machine doubling is common and mostly worthless, but true hub doubling occurs during the creation of the die itself, locking the error into every coin struck from that die. And if a 1996 P dime were found with a dramatic, undocumented double die affecting the date, the word liberty, the motto "I in God we trust," or Roosevelt's facial features, and if that doubling were strong enough to be unmistakable under magnification, it would force researchers to rewrite reference books. Because undiscovered double dies from the Philadelphia Mint are rare, but not impossible. And when one appears decades later in high mint state condition, it suggests the die was either used briefly or the coins were overlooked entirely, both scenarios being extremely attractive to advanced collectors. And what pushes the value into the tens of millions is not just the presence of doubling, but the possibility of stacked errors, meaning multiple anomalies appearing on the same coin, such as double dies combined with die cracks, retained cuds, or misaligned strikes, because stacked errors are exponentially rarer than single mistakes, and rarity multiplies value rather than adds to it, and the 1996 production environment created fertile ground for these combinations, especially considering the sheer volume of coins struck and the wear placed on dies that were often pushed beyond ideal lifespans, leading to cracks that grew, chips that formed, and design elements that subtly shifted. And one of the most intriguing theories surrounding the $31 million valuation is the existence of a 1996 P dime struck with a rotated die, where the obverse and reverse are misaligned beyond acceptable tolerances, because dramatic rotations are visually stunning and mechanically significant, proving a failure in the press setup that should have been caught immediately. And if such a coin also exhibited other errors, it would represent a perfect storm of mistakes that collectors dream of but rarely see. And condition again becomes critical here, because a heavily worn error coin is interesting, but a mint state example with original luster, sharp rims, and minimal contact marks becomes something else entirely, something museum-worthy, something that auction houses would fight to represent, because they understand that wealthy buyers are not just purchasing metal, they are purchasing a story they can own, display, and pass down. And the Philadelphia Mint's lack of a mint mark adds psychological power to that story, because it reinforces the idea that this coin hid in plain sight, invisible among billions of others, And invisibility is a strange kind of rarity, one that allows legends to grow quietly until proof finally emerges. And then there is the topic of wrong dye usage, an error category that sounds obscure but has produced some of the most famous modern rarities. Because when dyes from different years, different hubs, or different design stages are accidentally mixed, subtle inconsistencies appear that only experts can detect. And if a 1996 P dime were discovered showing dye characteristics not officially recorded for that year, such as a mismatched font, spacing anomaly, or design detail tied to another production period, it would challenge established mint records, and challenging records is what turns a collectible into a historical artifact, because it forces institutions to acknowledge that the official story was incomplete. And incompleteness creates opportunity, and opportunity is where the biggest money moves quietly, privately, and decisively, and this is why the $31 million figure circulates in whispers rather than headlines, because elite collectors understand that public hype follows discovery, not the other way around, and until the right coin appears, authenticated by top grading services, analyzed by metallurgists, and accepted by the numismatic community, the legend remains dormant, waiting. And that waiting is what keeps people searching through rolls, collections, and inherited boxes. Because every legendary coin was once just another piece of change, overlooked until the day someone curious enough took a closer look, and that is the real lesson behind the 1996 P dime. Not that every coin is valuable, but that some coins carry secrets that only reveal themselves to those willing to look deeper. And if this story has you even slightly tempted to check your dimes, then it's doing exactly what it should. And if you want to stay ahead of the discoveries, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us, because the next continuation will dive even deeper into the specific error combinations, authentication battles, and real-world scenarios that could push a single 1996 P dime into the $31 million stratosphere. Just say continue, and I'll pick up from right here without missing a beat.